And we're recording. So tonight's guest is Lee Weems. Um, I learned about, I didn't learn about Lee Weems from the Lee Weems podcast, but he's probably how a lot of you have learned about Lee Weems. His podcast has had some of like the the greatest legends in our industry on it, and it's absolutely amazing. It's no surprise that he's doing it. He's a former sheriff's deputy of the, am I saying this right? Oconee County
Yeah,
Sheriff's Department. Yeah, Sheriff's Department of Georgia, Oconee County.
Oconee County Sheriff's Office.
Okay, Oconee County
Yeah.
Sheriff's Office. Also, another thing is he is a Rangemaster staff instructor, not just certified, but staff, as
Mhm.
in he's, he's authorized to award certificates for Rangemaster courses, and that's a big deal. That's a real big deal. So, Lee, thank you so much for coming on tonight.
Well, thank you for having me, sir.
So I'm really, really interested in talking about your podcast because
Uh,
here I am, trying out a podcast. It's hard. um, like how do you get your guests? How do you run that thing?
Oh,
Yeah.
kind of. I guess first was I did not intend to have a podcast. I didn't set out to do it. Didn't want to do it. But in my previous position with the sheriff's office, I was the public information officer for 12 years. And so if anyone Googled my name, they would get a news story from 2015 of me talking about a fatal crash. Or in 2017, me telling people, hey, we had a lot of burglaries, please lock your doors, type deals. And quite frankly, that was not leading people to my training business because my training business wouldn't show up until page 2 or 3 of Google results. And so it's like I had to get some content out there directly related to the training side of my business, for financial reasons, quite frankly. So I started a little video series that I called Stop and Think videos. And I would pose a question and would try to garner some back and forth responses. Um, a couple of contemporaries, Caleb Causey, Chris Cypress, those guys sent video responses back, and I would do a little intro and play those. And finally, it got to a point where I asked a question that was going to take a conversation to answer, not something that someone could just do a video clip and send it back to me. And so we said, we'll do a Zoom interview. And I posted that on YouTube. And a couple of more Zoom interviews followed with that. And someone asked me, well, when are you going to start sending these out as podcasts? I'm like, well, I'm not. I don't have any intention to do that. I'm just trying to get some content that steers people to the training side of it. And Carl Wren actually pointed me to the website Anchor, which is a subsidiary of Spotify, and it's actually a free podcasting service. And you put it on Anchor, it goes out. If you do all the settings correctly, it goes out to Apple and Google and everything else. Well, okay. So I went back and I downloaded all the videos from YouTube and then put them up as podcasts. And it started going. The podcast feed actually gets, oh gosh, 3 or 4 times the amount of plays as the YouTube channel does. Um, you know, YouTube is the second largest search engine on the internet next to Google, and YouTube is owned by Google. But the podcast feed by far exceeds the traffic we get on YouTube. And so that's just how it all started growing. Um, as far as the guests and everything, I'm very interested in the history and evolution of firearms training. And so I wanted to delve into that topic a bit, and I'm very mindful of the fact that we are losing what I call the Generation One gun guys. It's kind of the whole thing. We lose a World War II veteran every day.
Yeah.
I don't know if that math is still holding true, but at one point in time that was the case. And I sat back and think if I could sit and talk to my grandfather again, what kind of questions would I ask him about World War II versus the questions I asked him about him when I was 8 and 9 watching a war movie. The only direct question he ever answered was, "Yes, bombs do whistle when they drop out of a plane." And other than that, he wouldn't talk about it. And so now it's like I want to sit down and talk to the primary sources about what's happening. And I'll give you a for instance. we know contemporarily what we think of is the Weaver stance. And that's the locked out straight, strong arm, the elbow pointed to the ground on the support side arm, and the body standing bladed. Well, when you talk to Jerry McCown and you talk to Larry Mudgett and guys that were around Gunsight when all that was taking place, who refer to Jack Weaver as Jack and Jeff Cooper as Jeff because they knew them on a first name basis. And they all independently tell you that Weaver didn't do any of that, but he got tired of correcting people. Well, maybe we need to delve into that topic a little further. There's actually a Shooting Illustrated article in which Weaver said that he found out about all that stuff by reading about it in magazines. He didn't even know he did it.
So he read
Because he
about
didn't.
himself in the
Yeah.
magazine.
He's like, I read about all the stuff that I did in magazines, and I didn't do any of that. But if I were to put a picture up on the screen right now of what we call a Weaver stance, oh, that's Weaver. Well, it's not what Weaver looked like when he shot, because there's pictures out there of him shooting. And so
See,
going back and talking to a lot of those guys that were around then has really changed my perspective on a lot of what I thought was true.
yeah, it's changed a lot of my perspective too. It's very, very listenable. Like
Thank you.
I could just press play and throw my phone in my pocket and get going. So how do you all right, so we've talked about how do you find these people? I think there was a period before we recorded where, we talked a little bit about it, but man, just for the listeners and stuff like that, like can you talk a little bit about how you find these people, how you get them on?
I was able to interview a couple of the guys that I call the Gym 1 gun guys through personal connections at the outset. And word got back to some of the others. Hey, listen to so and so's interview on this show. And, you know, Dave Spalding, I interviewed him. He got contacted by a couple of guys. Hey, I saw your interview. I really liked it. And Dave said, well, would you do an interview? And some of them said yes, and some of them said no. And I got a few interviews that way. Cecil Birch mentioned Jerry McCown when I interviewed Cecil, because Jerry was the range master of Cecil's first gun sight class. Well, someone heard that, contacted Jerry, and said, "Hey, you got mentioned on this podcast," and they did an intro, and Jerry's done 2 episodes now. Freddie Blish likes the show, and he's been on as a guest, and he's lined up a number of guests. Like, for instance, the episode that interviewed today was Steve Tarani. Well, that was a direct episode, direct link to Freddie. Um, an upcoming episode that's going to really be of interest, I think, to a lot of people is a direct link to Freddie, and that's I'm going to be interviewing one of Jeff Cooper's daughters.
Oh wow.
And that's all from the audience setting up the connections. And then, some as I meet people through training and the like. And then some of us, we delve into a topic where I know people we can reach out to. And
That's got to be a ton of fun, right?
it is.
Like,
It is. It is.
yeah, gum.
Uh,
That sounds incredible.
One of my academic interests is history. I have an undergraduate minor in history. And one of the things you're taught in those classes is you go to the primary source, that it's always the most accurate information. And so that's why I want to talk to as many of the Gen 1 gun crowd as I can and document that oral history. Like I said, if I could sit down and talk to my grandfather now, what would I ask him? So I'm going to ask these guys what I could ask them while I can. And some of them are very interested in documenting that history while we still have the opportunity.
And guys like me are very interested in listening to it. Absolutely. So
Yeah.
I think I probably speak for all of your listeners when I say this. I hope that you understand just how much the work you're doing is appreciated. I really hope you do.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. If it had fallen flat on its face, it would have given me an easy easy out to stop doing it. But it keeps growing, and comments such as yours, like, well, okay, I'll find another episode to do, and it just keeps going. It's been much more rewarding than I thought it was going to be, and I'm very
Yeah.
appreciative of that, and very
So
humbled by it. Very
absolutely,
humbled by it. Yeah.
'cause these guys are legends. So speaking of legends, you've been working with a couple other legends as well, like Tom Gibbons with Rangemaster, and
Mhm.
I think you did a lot of work with Gary Spalding as well.
Dave Spalding.
Dave, why do I keep doing that? So yeah, Dave Spalding. I don't know why I make that association. I think there's somebody out there named Gary Spalding. I think he's a race car driver or something like that.
Could be.
So, but yeah. So, what is it like working with Gary Spalding? And did I say it again?
He did.
Oh my god! So we're leaving that in too.
Yeah.
So, so what's it like working with Dave Spalding? Dave,
Uh,
and
it's been
yeah,
very again very rewarding and very humbling to have several guys like of Tom and Dave's um, their stature in the business take an interest in my development and help that along. Um, I actually hosted Dave about 2016, I think it was, for a class, and did the adaptive pistol because there were several of his combative pistol classes scheduled in my area and I didn't want to compete with them. And then I was at Tom's house, and he and John Hearn and I and John Murphy and Tiffany and Nikhil and Lynn are all sitting around and we're watching one of Spalding's videos. And we're trying to figure out what he's doing with these inboard manipulations. And I was like, well, let's just go to his class. And so Tom and John Hearn and I signed up for a Spalding class, and we went as students. And that was fun because we get up each morning, go eat breakfast, go to the class, spend all day in class, then we would go to dinner. And Dave went to dinner with us a couple of nights, and then it was like we'd go back to the hotel and sit around and talk about the entire day and whatever else the discussion led to. So it was very fun from a learning experience, and plus the social aspect of that. From there, I ended up going to a couple of more Dave's classes, and a friendship developed, and text and call and email and all that kind of thing. And he said he was going to do his instructor development class. And I'm like, wow, I would love to get that certification, but I had already agreed to help Tom with a class in Wisconsin. Well, I can't call Tom. I said, you know what, Tom, I'm going to bail on you and go help this other guy. And
I got a pretty good idea how that would go.
yeah, and so I wasn't able to go to the handgun combatives instructor class. And so I kept pestering Dave about doing another one. He's like, no, I'm not going to. Well, then I had the chance to teach at his home range. And I taught a shotgun class on Friday, a carbine class on Saturday, and a pistol class on Sunday. And he came to all three classes. And at the end of the third day, he walks up to me and he's holding this folder in his hand. He said, I know you weren't able to come to the class. He says, I know you know my material because you've been to 4 classes that I teach. He said, now that I've seen you organize and present 3 different platforms over 3 different days, everything, I'm satisfied that you will do the material justice. And he handed me a handgun combatives instructor certification. Wow, that's
Yeah.
that's whatever. There's another gentleman, and I can't recall his name correctly, that also got a certificate in such a manner. Dave awards that belt buckle if you shoot his skill on demand drill, or you can clean a standards on one attempt. And I've got 2 belt buckles. This other guy's got 5. So that's yeah. I'd say he's got a pretty good handle on
That's
things.
pretty strong. Yeah.
Yeah. And so there's me and him, and I think the 19 guys went through the instructor certification class. Um, I hosted Tom for my very first open enrollment class in April of 2014. Prior to that, every bit of training I'd had been through the law enforcement government sector. And I hosted Tom because I was trying to develop my own program with the sheriff's office. Like, I need some other sources. And lo and behold, next thing I know, he's put his, so to speak, taking me under his wing and is giving me a list of books to read and classes to attend. And stuff. And finally, I was like, okay, I'm done with the list. What do I do now? I was like, well, now you start teaching. And, here we are. And he invited myself and the other 4 staff members to his house one weekend, and we thought we were coming to work on a history project. Like we were going to do like a private class with Tom that was about the history and evolution of firearms training. And we had a bunch of pre-work we had to do. Everything. When we showed up, he's like, you 5 are going to, well, at the time, Akil wasn't part of it. So you 4 are going to codify the Rangemaster doctrine. And so we sat in Tom's living room and argued about what the Rangemaster doctrine was. And Tom would go into another room. And if we heard us get a sticking point, he'd come out and referee. Or he'd come out every so often, okay, show me what you got. And we developed a presentation of about the 10 principles of what is the Rangemaster doctrine. And we present that each year. We do a Rangemaster Instructor reunion. And if you come to that, you get to see that presentation. And it's like, here is the doctrine. And
Man, that sounds incredible.
It was. It was very, we carried Hearn. Hey,
I'm sure he's gonna watch this too. Yeah. What is going on with you and Hearn? I don't understand.
Well, if you spend any time around him, you'll understand.
Yeah, he's an incredible. When you look up the word nerd in the dictionary, like that's the thing though, because I speak nerd.
Yeah.
All right.
Yeah.
I relate to that. So, but yeah, like imagine that sitting in Tom's. So was that while Tom was living in Memphis, or was it in Florida, or what?
Florida.
Okay. Yeah,
Now,
pretty cool.
I did my Rangemaster Instructor Development class was the last event ever held in the Rangemaster facility. We went to lunch and came back, and there was a note on the door that the facility was closed.
Wow. So that was 2014.
Mm-hmm. That would have been August of 2014.
Wow.
And they moved to Florida a couple of years later.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So let's see. You talked about let's see, you hosted some classes at Dave Spalding's home range. Oh, what is his home range? Is it Boondocks or
No,
somewhere
Dave
else?
actually lives in the Dayton, Ohio area.
Okay.
And he was a member of the club there, and the club brought me in to do the classes. Well, the member of the club did.
Mm.
And,
I regret not going to a Dave Spalding class. Because I think once a year he would have courses at Boondocks Firearms
mm-hmm.
Training Academy and
Yeah.
like Raymond, Mississippi.
Mm-hmm.
I always told myself I'll go next year, and now there's no more next year.
It's funny that you say that. I was reading a Louis Hour book when Louis passed away.
Oh wow.
Oh, Hour book. Like I just found out about him. And I started reading this book, and then I'm on Facebook, and I see that he's gone. Kind of about the time I was becoming aware of Pat Rogers, he passed away.
Yeah.
And, so then it became a mission. All right, I'm going to get to as many of the Gen 1 and guys as I can. I was fortunate enough to be a part of a group that went and trained with Larry Mudgett a year and a half ago. And, he was 74 at the time. So how much longer is he going to be active in the business? And so if you're out there and you're trying to decide on which classes to go to, and you got the young new hotshot or the legendary guy, the guy that's been doing it a minute, okay, the young hotshot may or may not be around in another year. Go train with the old guy, because you'll have more opportunity to get back to the other guy at some point.
Yeah. So one of my first firearms training courses was under Akil Kadir.
Mm-hmm.
He taught my first instructor course, and that was when he had the board. He has this board of names where every time he mentions a name, he writes it on the board.
Hmm.
and Larry Mudgett was pretty close to the top. And the only other time where I heard anybody mention Larry Mudgett was on your podcast. Like you were talking about some of the stuff that you would do with trigger stuff, with trigger
Hmm.
manipulations and trigger management.
Hmm.
Um, how much of that do you incorporate into your classwork? Like so, um, and we'll talk a little bit more about
Hmm.
first person training here in a little bit. But
Yeah.
how much of that do you mix into your coursework?
Well, you can't revamp your material every time you go to a class, like completely revamp it. And you don't want to be like an imitation of somebody else out there. It's what can you incorporate from what you learn into how you present and teach. Um, there's probably a little something of every instructor that I've taken a class from in the classes that I teach. Um, I already had the class that I call trigger management before I went and took the Larry Mudgett class. What I learned from him was a language to say what I had been trying to say for years and didn't know how to say it. And all of a sudden, he was doing this in 1985. Yeah, it's when he came up with this. And it just, it was before the internet and before everything was instantly around the world and people stealing it and everything. And I went back, and probably now the first hour or hour and a half of that class is directly my spin on a drill that Larry Mudgett developed and came up with, but with full attribution. And then that goes right into the rest of the class I developed. Um, there's a lot of
So,
Dave Spalding in what I do.
mm,
There's a lot of Tom Givens in what I do. Um, uh, there's a guy that a lot of the training world doesn't necessarily know as well as a guy named Eric Lund, who really helped me out a lot. Um, a lot of back and forth conversations, going to the range and working through things with me. Eric was a professional three gunner, but he's also a longtime law enforcement officer. He's actually approaching retirement, and so he had it from the operational side and the competitive side, and taught me a lot with that. They all have kind of shaped where I am now. A guy named Sam Conway was the first guy that actually coached me instead of saying stop jerking the trigger. Oh, so there is actually something other than just saying that. And so that it's just kind of been, I got bad instruction when I started out. I want to do better for the people that I get a chance to touch.
yeah,
And uh, to me, it all comes down to two things as far as running the gun for defensive purposes: get the gun between you and the bad guy in a usable form, press the trigger without misaligning the gun. The rest of it's just window dressing and tweaks. Yeah. Weaver or isosceles? Well, I suggest you use one.
yeah.
It doesn't matter. Doesn't matter.
So we all know that you have your own firearms training company. It's a
Hmm.
first person safety.
Hmm.
Um, let's see. I know that there's trigger management, and then there's a couple other courses as well. Would you mind
Yeah,
speaking to some of your curriculum?
sure. And first person safety was my second attempt at a business name. And it's coming up with the business name is so hard that I haven't been able to come up with a good one. And so I don't like the name, but I'm stuck with it at this point. Trigger management is my favorite of my classes to teach. And it is the most technical of the shooting classes that I teach. And it's all about pressing the trigger without misaligning the gun. It's teaching you to become your own best coach. And so that you diagnose why it is that you miss, and then you learn how to fix it. And so you come away from that class with a methodology where you can go to the range on your own and continue to coach yourself and improve yourself. Um, my second favorite class to teach is my what I call now called pistol craft. I used to call it defensive pistol skills, but I renumbered everything here a couple of years ago. And it's my take on it's say Givens combative pistol, Spalding combative pistol, everything. It's a 1-day class. But it's everything that I think you needed to know. It's basically the lifestyle rules of possessing a firearm in live fire format. And I love to give Hearn grief, but I will say that John Hearn's cognitive pistol, John Murphy's street encounter skills, and I'm going to be arrogant and say my pistol craft class, I think, are the 3 traveling road shows that people need to be getting to after you've trained with all the Spaldings and the Givenses and that crowd.
I got to get up with John Hearn. I want to ask him to get on here because I feel like he made an interesting point on your podcast that maybe we do too much shooting in shooting classes.
Absolutely.
Absolutely, I think
Absolutely.
so too.
Absolutely.
So yeah, I'm in 100% agreement with taking more John Murphy classes, more John Hearn
Mhm.
classes, and just making better decisions with a gun in your hand. Um,
I'll say this, I learned more about the technical ability to shoot the firearm and more about how to teach the technical ability to shoot the firearm in the 4-day Larry Mudgett class that I went to than everything else combined, and fired 130 live rounds in 4 days.
in 4 days.
Yeah,
In 4 days.
4 days.
Like I've gone to 4-hour classes and shot like 100. Yeah.
We didn't
Wow.
we didn't fire a live round until day 3.
You're blowing my mind right now. Okay.
And I learned more about me as a shooter and improved my ability as a shooter, and more importantly, my ability to teach what I know to people in that class. And 130 rounds in 4 days.
Man. So how did you get a hold of like these guys that like how did you know to train with guys like Larry Mudgett and Tom Givens and Dave Spalding? How did you learn about these guys?
Stumbled across Tom on the internet and just seeing things. And let me I'll kind of backtrack here a little bit. Um, when I became the chief deputy in 2009, the sheriff told me, he brought me in to mainly to revitalize the training that his deputies were getting and to bring them up to where he thought they needed to be. And basically, it's your training program. Yeah, you can go to any school you want to as long as you bring the information back to the sheriff's office. And when I found the open enrollment world, and basically through a writing of Todd Green, if you're familiar with
Mm.
Todd Green of pistol
Todd
training,
Lewis Green.
yeah, Todd Lewis Green, someone sent me an article that he wrote, and that coincided with him opening that pistol forum online, the discussion forum. And so the article that was sent to me that he wrote led me to Pistol Forum. I get on there, and in the early days of Pistol Forum, there were a lot of heavy hitters on there. Unfortunately, internet happened, and not all of them hang around as much as they used to. Um, Todd designated certain people at the start with the tag SME, subject matter expert, and it would show up under their name. And I kept seeing these guys, and I noticed certain things that were common in their backgrounds. And so I started studying each of those people. Okay, if they are the recognized subject matter expert, how did they get there? And so certain things were in their background, like a lot of them, the FBI firearms instructor school or certain other schools. And so I went through all of those on the government side that I could go to, and then I brought in Tom and started down the open enrollment side. Um, and that's how I found out about Tom, was through basically Todd Green is how I got there. Um, Through those associations, I started to meet and learn about all the other people. The group that went to Larry Mudgett was just a group of us from the training world. Uh, Daryl Bolke actually arranged the class, and the group was Daryl, Wayne Dobbs, John Holston, who is a name everybody should know and be training with. And I'm probably going to forget somebody when I go to naming all of them. David Cagle, John Hearn, myself, Bill Foster went. and I'm forgetting somebody. And then they rounded up somebody who had never shot a gun to be there so that we could see that the material worked
Ah,
with newbies and not just us.
like a control, you
Yeah,
know?
like it was.
And then
Yeah, exactly. That was what it was, like a control group. And through the association with Bulky and Dobbs, and that's how I got to go to that. Cagle told me they were going and said, "Hey, contact Bulky if you want to go." And so I contacted Bulky, and that's how I got in there. Now he has a website where he advertises his classes called Marksmanship Matters, and I had looked at it numerous times. I had run across his name in some articles and the like, and I just never the schedule never worked out when this private group was going on. When I got the chance to go, I'm going, and it turned out to be huge. Yeah, I'm at several thousands of hours of training, and then I go out there. This one class in the desert blows my mind. And okay,
Daggum.
yeah.
So I have to be honest.
Mhm.
I looked up your bio. I usually do that for all of my guests, just so. And at first, I was looking it up to see, like, okay, like how do I introduce you? But what always happens with almost every one of my guests is
Mhm.
I look at this staggering, just massive scroll of just incredible classes and names, and it's like, man, I want to go to this stuff. Um, if like what we already talked about, Larry Mudgett, we talked about
Mhm.
Dave Spalding and Tom Givens. What were some other really, really fun classes that you went to that kind of shaped you into the type of instructor you are today?
Oh, now I got to start thinking through the other list of things and then putting them in there.
It's long. It's a massive list.
I'll confess that the reason the list is up there like it is there was a couple of trainers here in Georgia where I live that had some false claims up on their web pages,
Hmm.
to the point one was claiming an award from the Peace Officer Standard and Training Council that doesn't exist, and some other things. I'm like, okay, if you're going to make up stuff and put it on your web page, I'm going to hit you with a list that's for comparison's sake. Let's just put it that way. Um, oh gosh, like I said, probably everything that I've taken influences me somehow. Um, from a negative side, when I was in the police academy in '99, um, I struggled. I graduated the police academy with an 82 and an 84 on firearms. We had to shoot the course. You had to pass it twice to graduate the academy. 80s passing.
Oh, so you almost didn't make it.
Yeah, I made it with an 82 and an 84. And on one instance, I smashed a shot low left. And the guy that was walking along the line behind me that called himself an instructor that basically was just there to hang out for the day and not work shift. Weems, you're jerking the trigger. Okay, yes, sir. How do I fix it? Stop jerking the trigger. Well, thank God you were here, or we never would have made it, sir. Is what I'm thinking. And I was just so fed up and frustrated. And it was I got a chance to go later to go to the Georgia Public Safety Training Center, and there was a guy there named Sam Conway who was former Army Marksmanship unit, and it was a basic level 1 pistol class at the training center. It was what used to be the transition from revolver to auto class. They call it semi-auto 1.
Hmm.
Back then, they've restructured some of it now. And we were shooting a drill called precision pairs, where you try to get 2 shots on the target as close together as you can. And I put 1 shot in the target and push the other one down low left. And Sam walks by, "Hey, you're jerking the trigger." And I had had enough. I had had enough. And I holster my pistol and I turn around and say, "You guys keep saying, stop jerking the trigger. Not one of you has told me how to stop doing it." He said, "Well, okay, settle down, sport. Turn around, face the target." And he coached me. Now, it turned out one of the drills that he did, Larry Mudgett originated. Now, he didn't go
Hmm.
through the whole history of it there with me on the range, but he did basically Larry Mudgett's trigger drills with me. and I start tearing the same hole out of the target. And I'm not one that uses profanity. This is an exact quote. I start tearing the same hole out of the target. And he says, "Fucking magic, isn't it?" And he walks off. Now, through sheer determination, I had worked myself up to an 86 on the qual course just before I went to this class. I came back from it and shot a 96. So just that one little bit of coaching and my qual scores jumped 10 points. Now I still wasn't consistent. I still, had some other issues that I had to fix. But that one moment of coaching, like, okay, there are people out here that actually can shape this. Uh, that would have been 99ish, 2000ish when that happened. Um, I got good enough that in 2003, my agency sent me to firearms instructor school. And that class was nothing more than a class on how to run a line of shooters, which is basically the case with most uh, what I call the institutional schools, FLETC, FBI, and the kind. It's all about how to run groups of shooters through courses of fire and score their targets. It's not about the individual coaching. I come back in 2003 with that first instructor certification. Like they said, all right, Weems, we just had a guy flunk the academy on firearms on Friday. He's get a chance to reshoot on Monday. You've got the weekend to fix him. And I didn't know how to fix him, but I'm the firearms instructor.
Mm.
And so that became learning more about the topic, actually trying to go down and learn how to coach people. And that's just been the steady drive since then. Like say I got my first firearms instructor in 2000 certificate in 2003. I began to think I knew what I was doing in 2016.
Yeah.
And that period of 2014 to 2016 in the open enrollment world is basically what it took, because I didn't get it on the institutional side.
Yeah.
And in the last couple of years, I kind of started to feel like a little bit more of an authority. And I think, quite frank, Gen 1 is passing out of, they're not going to be around much longer. Look at
Yeah.
how many of them are in their 70s. There got to be people to step up and take their place now and fill those voids. And, I hope I'm ready. It's going to be like guys like John Hearn, Murphy, Akil, and I can name a whole list of people, but we've got to be ready to step up when we're handed the keys. And
Absolutely.
that's where we are in the movie.
Yeah. So, man, just listening to this stuff, it makes me want to go to a Lee Weems class. I've been wanting to go to trigger management forever. I would have gone to this last one that you had in
Mm-hmm.
at a Royal Range, but
Mm-hmm.
I had a kid, I had my son, so priorities. But
Yeah.
let's speak a little bit to the listeners and the viewers
Mm-hmm.
that they may not have ever gone to a class, or
Mm-hmm.
they may not have ever shot a match or anything like that. If they're preparing to go to a Lee Weems class, like, how do they prepare? What do they bring?
Uh, read the equipment list and bring everything that's on the equipment list, um, and just show up ready to coach, be coached. I like to tell people it's like trigger management is my best selling class. It's my favorite class to teach. The only way it doesn't work is if you lie to yourself. If you're willing to believe what your eyes are seeing
Hmm.
and listen to what I'm telling you, it's not because I'm telling you, but it's you know 20 years now of study. If you're listening to the information that you're given and you're applying it, there's no way for you not to succeed and not to lead the class better than you were when you came. Um, and you're going to leave that class with a system of practice that you can go develop. And that's one of the things too, as we see in the training business, is people show up to a class once a year or once in their lifetime, and they think this is now I'm trained. Training is where you learn how to practice, and you have to follow through on what you learn in the training classes off, outside on your own, and occasionally get back in front of a knowing eye that can watch you and make sure you're doing things correctly. Hearn makes the point of if someone went through a 250 pistol class at gun sight as a young adult, and then they practiced what they learned in that 250 class over their lifetime, they'll be able to handle any situation you throw at them. They're ready. Um, Now, obviously, I want you coming to my class. I want you going to Hearn's class. I want you going to Murphy's class. I want you to go on everything else because we all need your business. And it's fun. It's social. You get to hang out with people that are like minded and that don't think it's weird because you want a gun and that you're out shooting. Um, and so there's a lot of that aspect to it as well. Um, Kind of funny. I'm going to backtrack way backtrack here.
I'm
I
here
gradu-
for it.
I graduated from high school with a plan that I would never set foot in a classroom again. I was done. Period. I'm out. Yeah, never going to happen. After 3 years of manual labor, I was going, maybe there's something to that air conditioned classroom life. And I was working in a custom metal shop, and the closest place we could go eat lunch was a Dairy Queen. And someone from Georgia Military College put up a flyer in that Dairy Queen that said you could go to school full time for $1 a quarter. And one day I decided, all right, that's it. I'm out. I quit my job at the metal factory. I went down to GMC and took did their stuff I had to enroll. Um, I was like, I'm going to give this 1 quarter and see. And I was young enough that because I was under 25, that if I was in college as a full-time student, I could go back on my parents' health insurance. And like, so I've got 1 quarter. I'm going to try this, and I'm going to see what this whole college thing is about and how it's going to be. And um, got straight A's that quarter. Okay, I'll give it another go. And I enrolled for the 2nd quarter. My father said, "I can't. I'm shocked. I told your mama this is going to last 1 quarter, and he's going back to a job somewhere, and everything." And uh, rolled straight through full time to my bachelor's degree. I was actually intended to be a middle school teacher. Was what my initial major was. Uh, Once I got to the point we had to declare, got to my senior year and got to the point where I had to go do my student teaching, and they told me that I was not allowed to have a job. And at this point in time, I'm 25, 26, somewhere around in there, and I can't afford to not have a job. And now in Georgia, you have to certify, if you're doing middle school education, you have to certify in 2 separate subject matter areas. And so I was certifying in social studies and English were going to be the two areas that I taught. And I was closer to a political science degree than anything else because of the social studies aspect. And so
Yeah.
I went ahead and got a bachelor's in political science with a minor in history. And I said, well, this degree isn't employable. I've just spent 4 years in a classroom. That's not going to lead to a job. And so I found a police department that would pay for me to go to graduate school as one of the perks of the job. And it's kind of funny. My father did 27 years in the military and was bound and determined that I was not going to go into the military. And he was actually overseas on a mission trip. And I traveled from college back to our hometown, spent the night at his house, and went for my job interview with the police department. And get ready to graduate from college, just like I'm, a week away from graduation. My parents said, "Well, what are you going to do when you graduate?" Well, I've already got a job. What are you going to do? I'm going to be a police officer. And and my mama's, what? And my daddy looks over at me. I said, "You never said I couldn't be a cop. You just said I couldn't join the military." Okay. Um, so I went to school to get a master's of public administration from the University of Georgia. And all of that to get to this point, I did not realize until the last few years how much of my public administration degree also plays into the training world. And two big areas in particular. In some of my personnel classes, I learned about Maslow's hierarchy of needs. And our good friend John Murphy, his RV is named Maslow from that,
Yeah.
Maslow's hierarchy of needs. The other one is Bloom's taxonomy. The other area is Bloom's taxonomy, and that's about areas of knowledge and asking the right questions and everything else. But back to Maslow, you've got your, and I'm not going to get them all correct because I don't have it sitting right here in front of me. You got your basic physiological needs, food, shelter, etc. And then you keep going up this, and okay, well, I've got my basic needs to live provided for. Now, what's the next thing I want to go? And at the top of that, you start to get into basically social stuff, being around, peer. And then at the very top is self actualization. All right, but you have to satisfy all those rungs on this pyramid to get up to the top to get to self actualization. Well, a lot of the training, the people that go to classes, they're looking for that social network. If for people that are just, if the only reason they're taking a class is because the government said that they had to take this class to get a carry permit or a carry license, whatever terminology your state uses, well, that's all they see it for. So once they satisfy that need, they're done. But for people that want a little more and that want a little more, and they keep digging into it and grabbing hold to the subject matter, they're climbing all the way to the top, trying to get that self-actualization. But just below that is the social aspect of it. And what is TACCon? How many people do you see show up at TACCon and go sit in the tent and don't go to classes?
Oh man. Yes. Yeah. Huh.
And yeah, I took my first open enrollment class in April of 2014, which was Givens Combative Pistol. In 2016, I saw a picture from a training event in the Midwest, and I knew over half of the people in the picture. Either knew them or knew who they were by seeing them in the picture. It's a pretty small group of people that do this.
Yeah.
And, and when we design training classes as instructors, we have to look at that Maslow's hierarchy of needs and what are we trying to achieve? Why is the student here? And that'll basically shape what you're doing as an instructor if you use it and apply it correctly. And then the Bloom's taxonomy basically describes all the levels of knowledge. And, basically the first level is being able just to regurgitate knowledge. And quite frankly, much of firearms training out there is nothing but regurgitated knowledge. All right. When you get to the top of people who are able to synthesize knowledge, that's the Givenses, that's the Spaldings, that's the Mudgetts, that's the Ken Hackathorns, that's all those guys. Um, climbing up that taxonomy, trying to get to that point, kind of parallels what's going on over in Maslow's hierarchy of needs. And when your phone rings and you look at the caller ID and it's Ken Hackathorn calling, it's pretty cool.
Yeah.
It's like, this must be what Herm feels like every time I call him when he sees.
He's gonna see this, and
Oh, I
then
hope so. I hope so.
he's he's gonna hit me up like, "What is going on with
Yeah.
Lee Weems on your podcast?"
Oh, I do this to him every chance I get. So
So, oh man, you know what? Wow, it just occurred to me that of the two of you, you were the first one to make it onto this podcast. You beat John Hearn onto the podcast.
well, all that matters is that I beat John in any endeavor. So you make sure you tell him that I beat him. So
I'll let him know. Oh man. So Lee, if we want to shoot with you or if we want to train with you, how do we get a hold of you?
um, two web pages will get you to me. One is That Weems Guy, which is the name of my podcast because I was so original. I'll just put my name in it. That'll be simple. Um, and then the other is First Person Safety. If you either one of those.com will get you to me and we'll get you to my class lineups. We'll mention the last weekend in April coming up this year at Red Hill Range, which is in Martin, Georgia, which is near the Georgia-South Carolina line. John Hearn and Eric Gelhaus and I are doing a team class called the Cognitive Conclave. I'm very excited about that class. I'm looking forward to it. There'll be times when you have all three of us together, and then we'll be splitting the students up in groups. Like one morning, half of them will be with me, half of them will be with Eric, and then we'll flip-flop those two groups. And so everyone will get every block of instruction, and very excited. And it's all geared towards cognition with the pistol in your hand. And it's not going to be just standing there and blasting at targets or whatever. It's going to be, it's having to think with the pistol in your hand. And I know that scares some people. Don't be scared of failure. If you're going to fail in training is where you need to fail. It's not when you're actually put to the test. Now, and I say that, I don't want you to get the impression that we're going to be trying to fail you when you come to the class. That's not the case. That's not the case. But we are going to try to provide a learning environment. We're not playing got you. We're trying to provide a environment in which you can test yourself and learn with no consequences other than your pride. If you fail, and okay, we'll walk up and pat you on the back because that's why you're there. That's why you're there. I think that's why people don't go to force on force training.
Oh,
Because they're scared that their ego is going to get bruised. And well, if I'm going to screw up, and I want to learn it when there's no consequences, but maybe a little stinging pain from a sim round. That's why we train, is to learn from it, and so that when we are put to a test, we actually perform.
absolutely, man. That sounds like an excellent place to wrap it up. Let's see. So those links, that Weems guy, first person safety,
Mm-hmm.
and the cognitive conclave. I'm gonna put those links in the description.
Okay.
That'll be on not just Anchor, but also on YouTube. Those will be in the description. You want me to put your socials on there as well, like Facebook or
Sure.
Instagram?
Sure. You
Okay.
put the first person safety Facebook page. There's also on Instagram, but it just posts pictures right over to Facebook. We do have a That Weems Guy Show Facebook group that's much more interactive than the page, and a lot of the people who are guests on the show participate in the group. And I tell them, and they're encouraged, if you come on the show, you're invited and encouraged to post your links and stuff there. And since I've been on your show, you get in the group and you post links to this show there.
Awesome. I'll put those links in the description as well.
Sure.
And daggum, yeah. Tell you what, this hour passed seamlessly. This was a ton of fun. Lee, thank you so much for doing me the honor.
Well,
Thank you for
thank you.
spending your time with us.
Thank you for
And
having me on.
and folks, if you're listening or if you're watching, I just want to let you know how much I appreciate you for spending your time with us. You could have done it anywhere. You could have spent your time with anyone or anything, but you spent it with us. And I just want to let you know how much I appreciate it. Folks, thanks for watching. Welcome to Memphis.